show your piece. And so this is a piece that you wrote for Architect in 2020. It's called Angel Share. Um, so if you could just start by telling us a little bit about the piece itself and what inspired it.
Yes, well, it was actually inspired by an idea that I had quite a few years ago. But you know, when you buy a bottle of scotch and you open up the description on the inside, well, they have these like very beautiful, professionally written descriptions of the nose, taste, and finish. So when I read those, you know, just having, you know, obviously an interest in understanding the whiskey itself, but it sounded like music to me. So it just was the very beginning of this idea
Mhm.
of turning like that kind of poetic words back into music.
Mhm. And
Mm,
so the three movements of the piece are three different kinds of scotch from this one distillery.
that's
Um,
right.
how would you characterize the three different movements?
Well, so basically, I sort of took the instrumentation that I had and I looked at the different kind of quality that, you know, actually the actual experience of smelling, tasting, and the finish of each different kind of Scotch whiskey. And each one has kind of a theme within itself, like within its own quality. So like the first one, it's very much inspired by like a feeling of a deep crescendo that's kind of like sand, described as sort of sand singing beneath your feet. And the second one is very woody and smoky. And so this sort of obviously helped me choose which instruments to use for each one or which ones to highlight.
Mhm.
And the third one is like more like torrents and metallic and turbulent. So I was using more cymbals and metal.
Mhm. Mhm. And yes, I'm glad you brought up the instrumentation because in addition to kind of the more standard percussion instruments that we would see in a percussion ensemble, you also include unique instruments, even for a percussion ensemble context, such as the musical saws and and the misery whip.
Mm-hmm.
So what drew you to include these instruments in the work?
Well, I mean, immediately when thinking about the like this idea of an odor and a taste and a finish, I couldn't just imagine sort of onsets and offsets in sound. So I really was looking for a more flexible tone. So
Mhm.
that's where I was looking for something that could have glissandi.
Mhm.
So that's what led to me like looking around. I asked Ben, like, what do you guys have that bends? There's got to be something that bends. And we looked through everything and just nothing had quite the range that I was looking for. So then I found, I just looked up musical saws. And then I became, okay, this will be an interesting combination, especially with the acoustics of Jesus and the ambient sort of theme that we're working with. And then I thought that um, musical saws were like super interesting to check it out. But the misery whip was you know, I happened to be at home for Christmas last year where I was working on this, and I was just rummaging around the shed in my parents' house and I found a huge saw. And I asked what it was called, and you know, we talked about it, and it's just like a very old, the colloquial term misery whip for a two-person saw.
Mhm.
And of course, it's not exactly an instrument like the musical saw, but it does resonate. So I
Mhm.
incorporated that one just for, you know, to take it all the way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love, as you know, I love the musical saw. I really bonded with it.
Oh yeah, I could tell. Yeah, and it really did. It does seem like an extension of a percussionist's set. You know what I mean? Like you guys play almost anything, really.
And we're
Um,
used to bowing stuff.
yeah, and then of course bowing everything became the other part of the concept because once we started using the musical saw, then bowing everything sort of matched.
Right, and created the connection between the
Exactly.
instruments as well.
Yeah.
Oh, great, yeah. The next question is about the church itself and the acoustic. So obviously you wrote the piece with the church in mind, because we had planned to originally perform it in there, and we did record it in there. So how did the space of the church, and especially the reverb that's in there, how did that influence your writing of the piece?
Well, yeah, it was actually the commission itself was literally for that environment, and I could never have thought of this idea or put it together for your quartet without it being in that space, because it's all about ambience. It's all about that reverb is so long that even in some of the more articulated things that was in the piece, it was like so blurred. So really long tones and bending tones was just going to have to be that's what's going to resonate in there. So having played in there in the past with some vocal work I've done, I was aware of what it was going to be like. So the idea of an odorous sound or a sonorous odor, like in that sense, it's just something that does have resonance in a large kind of space. So I think it was just the idea and the space were like a perfect match for each other.
Right. Yeah, I mean, on our end, like once we got into the space for the recording session, stuff just really made sense.
Yeah.
Moving from our small dry studio into the church, and it was like, okay.
Yeah, I think I remember it, like I didn't come to see any of the rehearsals in the studio because I knew it's going to be some really long spaces between sounds, but they were filled up, immediately with that reverb. So yeah, I love the sound of that space. Like, I mean, absolutely, it's sort of magical.
Yeah, totally.
So.
Oh, cool.